how do you describe crew?
Organized chaos.
A group of mostly high school age young people.
And they're coming in from all over the place. Now that is a story.
There is a work aspect to it, but there's also like a spiritual formation aspect to it that we think is actually even more important than the work aspect.
16-year-old kids encouraging each other to follow Jesus. Like, come on. What's the discipleship behind the road team experience?
In churches, you're interacting with people, you're teaching lessons, you're sitting under teaching. Some of the growth is just innate.
Serving with Life Action in that capacity is training for life. Spiritual formation, human formation, such a rich training ground.
Giving people a space to be able to discover is such a gift.
Welcome to Changed Lives, a podcast from Life Action. As we wrap up the year, we're continuing our special December series, taking time to look deeper into what Life Action is all about and how God is changing lives through this ministry. In today's episode, I'm joined by Bryce Howard and Jimmy Herdklotz to talk about one of the most powerful parts of Life Action's mission, discipleship. From high school students in our crew program to college-aged young adults serving on the road teams to those stepping into ministry through our residency program, this conversation is all about how God is shaping the next generation of revival leaders. This month's episodes are part of our year-end campaign, a time when we invite friends and ministry partners to help fuel what God is doing through Life Action. Nearly 80% of our annual revenue comes from donations from people like you who believe in our mission of reviving relationships through transformative events. Now, here's Bryce and Jimmy. Jimmy and Bryce.
Stacy.
Hello.
Thank you for taking time out of your crazy schedules to come back here at the table and to talk to me about young people. Yes.
Yes.
And discipleship.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is the story that is always happening here at Life Action. And if you've listened to any of the interviews, that is a through line for many people. Their entry point into this ministry, it was really through either coming through crew or serving on a road team. And the reality is our ministry really runs on the energy, the talent of lots of young adults.
Yes.
We got a lot of young people
we do.
around here. So we really kind of have these three lanes when we talk about discipleship of either high school age kids or young adults. We have the crew lane, which they're coming in to help serve at camp, either at retreats or at family camp. We have the road team lane, and then beyond that, we have another lane that if you're considering maybe going into ministry, we have opportunities for that as well.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about all three of those lanes.
Great.
And what your guys' thoughts are in terms of what is our purpose and our role in those three areas, and kind of those areas that you're leaning into. So let's talk about crew first. So how do you describe crew?
Organized chaos.
I would say, we have, it's a group of mostly high school age young people. There's a handful of graduate, young people, but mostly high school age young people that come and help serve at camp just to make everything run. We could not do it without them. They volunteer their time to be a part of that. And they come anywhere from some of them from 2 weeks, and some of them come for 10 weeks of the summer, spend, a lot of their time just, washing dishes and prepping meals and babysitting kids, scooping ice cream, cleaning bathrooms. I mean, all the behind the scenes stuff that goes on. They're a part of that during the summer, and then also during our fall and spring events. They'll come out on weekends and help us to do that.
Yeah.
So,
And two things you said there. They're coming in, and they're coming in from all over the place.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
We had kids from Arizona this year, Texas,
Canada.
Florida.
Yeah. I mean, they come from all over. Yeah.
They come from all over, and they come almost as like short-term missionaries because
Yes.
they're volunteering their time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now that is a story, right? Now you're talking about high school age kids. Some of them have to pay for gas money. Maybe they have, cars because they're maybe they're driving, but some of these kids are 14 years old, right?
Sure.
That's the
Yes,
starting
yes.
age for that. So instead of spending their summer maybe working a summer job back at home, they are serving. They're
Yes.
volunteering their
Yeah.
time. That's a pretty huge story.
It's pretty amazing. I think the draw comes from most of them have come from having attended camp.
Mm-hmm.
And as kids, then they would get to see the other crew and their family assistant, and they would look up to them, and they kind of get this idea of someday when I'm old enough, I get to do that. It kind of something when they anticipate,
Yeah.
this kind of like rite of passage
Hmm.
thing. I think is also, it's a way for them to kind of get out of the house, away from mom and dad, kind of start to develop some independence. But for the parents, it's a safe, environment where it's, there's supervision, there's, intentional spiritual formation, there's all of that. So I think it's a win-win for both parents and the students. And then I think the thing that keeps them coming back is the relationships that they make when they're here. That's amazing to me.
Yeah. Because on a practical level, they serve here, they stay here. So they come in on the weekend and they are in one of the bunkhouses, the girls' house, the guys' house, wherever they might be staying, but they're bunking with kids from other parts of the country.
Mhm.
And you're right, they have a definite level of freedom that they might not necessarily have at home.
Right. Yeah.
With that comes a lot of responsibility because they're not necessarily here just to have fun at summer camp. They're here to serve others. And so what does that look like, Bryce? Like on a practical level, give me some examples.
Well, so what it looks like is they have different responsibilities throughout the day. Kind of like Jimmy described earlier, we have a bunch of crew who will work in the kitchen for our food staff. We have a bunch who will do housekeeping. We have a group of crew who, not quite as many of the high school kids, but we have a group of crew who are family assistants. So they're helping families who have smaller kids. We have a crew who are doing activities. So all of these different responsibilities, they have a schedule that we make for them that we're like, hey, these are the hours that you're going to work every day, which usually works out to being about 8 hours a day that they'll work. But then the rest of the day, they just have to themselves. They have free. We try to do some really intentional discipleship when it comes to the things that not just what we're teaching them, but the ways that we're teaching them to live and operate with each other. So a lot of our emphasis is relational health.
Mhm.
So like this past summer, we walked through some principles from the Gospel of Matthew, in Matthew 18 specifically, where we're talking about conflict management, like Jesus's vision of how we should interact with each other when we're having conflict with one another, especially those who claim to be a follower of Jesus as well. So, and there's plenty of examples where we're doing life in the summer with each other, we're working, and just different things come up. And so part of Jimmy and I's responsibilities is just to kind of sit beside them and say, hey, how would Jesus operate in this relationship? What would Jesus do if he was standing in your shoes? And so there is a work aspect to it, but there's also, like Jimmy mentioned earlier, a spiritual formation aspect to it that we think is actually even more important than the work aspect. The work aspect just happens to be the practical context that they find themselves in. But what they're really here for in our eyes is we want them to come and we want to teach them how can we better follow Jesus and step into his vision of reality, And so for them to be able to learn those things at such a pivotal age, like such a formative age, we just find so exciting and life-giving. So,
Yeah. Tell me about some of the stories from this past summer.
Okay.
I read a testimony the other day from one of the young men who said before he came to camp, he was feeling just very distant from God, very questioning about just like who he was and what life was about, and really just depressed and discouraged. And he said, coming here, connecting with the friends that he made, the people are, that's a lot of it is just the community of other, young people who are on the same trajectory, or, like you said, they've given up their summer to serve and to care for other people. And so being around some of those people, he made some connections, some conversations that we had. Specifically, Bryce had a couple good heart-to-heart conversations with him, and he said he left here just on a whole nother plane with regard to his relationship to God and where he felt like he was, and he was just encouraged. And so that's one story that that comes to mind right away.
Yeah, there's another situation where, and this one was a little harder relationally. There were some things that I was noticing in a young man who we both love, who there were some things that I was noticing that were bringing up some concerns for me, and I wasn't really sure if I should lean into that. I wasn't really sure if should I point that out? Am I just seeing that? And that's not really what's going on. But I ended up, talking with Jimmy about it, and we were both just like, it's probably good to just have the conversation. So I sit down with him one morning and we have this conversation about some of the things I'm noticing. And in the moment, I'm like, I don't know if this is landing. I don't know if this is really connecting with him. I don't know if this is, something where he's just kind of telling me the right answers. At 16, it's hard to kind of gauge where they're really at.
Are they just saying the right words?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So, we kind of have the conversation. I walk away and I'm like, I stumbled through that, but I guess maybe it was helpful, So a few weeks go by, I get a text from his mom, and she just sends this really long paragraph about like the things that you brought up to our son. We've been trying to bring up to him for years, but it just never got through because we're his parents. There's just a different dynamic there. She goes, but you bringing those things up to him has made him turn in a completely different direction. And we just wanted to thank you so much for your investment, So stories like that, where in the moment, Jimmy and I have been talking back and forth about the Sermon on the Mount recently, and specifically the Lord's Prayer in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. And that line, give us today our daily bread, some scholarship that we've been looking into is kind of saying, it goes even deeper than just your daily bread. It's like your momentary bread. Like, what do you need right in that moment? So even in that moment where I was sitting across from this young man and I was like, I have no idea if this is landing. I have no idea what I'm saying right now. Like, I think I'm saying the right things. Like, the Spirit was giving me my momentary bread in that moment. And we got to see the fruit of that later with just the dynamics that he was going through with his parents. So stories like that are just so encouraging.
Which really points out that this isn't just a discipleship program for young people. This is for us.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I've been doing this. I've been in ministry for 30 something years. I forget.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning lessons every summer
Yeah.
and throughout all these interactions with these young people that, if you're just paying attention and listening to what God has to say.
Right.
Yeah.
So
what is it about this group of kids, this age group, that just you feel so drawn to in terms of investing in them in the discipleship?
Oh, man, that's a great question.
I think for me, it's a mixed bag. It's kind of, there's some kids that you just spend the whole summer like wanting to strangle, you're just like, and so there is that. So there's a little bit of that, but I think the thing that like really draws me is when you hear some of these stories, they're at such a formative age.
Yeah.
And most of them come here because they want to learn, they want to grow, they want somebody to invest in their lives, they want a community of people around them that love Jesus and are going the same direction. And so, whenever you can interact with people who already have kind of a heart and a bent towards that, and all we do is just kind of like let's help steer you that direction. Right. That's exciting for me, and then seeing too just the growth over the years of some,
because these kids come back.
Yes.
They typically
Yes.
they'll come once and then they'll just continue to come back.
Yep.
Yeah.
So even like one young man this summer who last year was here and had, it was a rough summer. He didn't end real well, and I had to call his dad and say, hey, listen, if things aren't a little bit better next year, I'm not sure he can stay. And so when he came, we were kind of on like a little trial period, and to see the growth in him over the course of the summer, and just even I can just envision in him being a future leader, in the crew program and potentially a team member, just because he's kind of got that. But just to see where he is this year compared to last year, and to be a part of that,
right?
I mean, it's so amazing. Yeah.
Some kids that come here. I mean, I was a teacher in a public school for a decade, right? Some kids that you get in your classroom, they're desperate and wanting someone to pour into them, and they don't maybe come from a place where they get that. And so there is like a hunger there for some kids that if you're able to steward that well, can have just tremendous impact on their lives, right? Like these kids that just become
what's
leaders.
tricky with that is sometimes that doesn't show up as hey, I'm here, pour into me, it shows up through like, outward expressions of, stubbornness and rebellion and anger and that's again how we're always learning is sometimes those kids that you just want to like call their parents and say, or send them home.
Right.
If we can see behind that and see, wait, where is this all coming from? That's super helpful.
Yeah.
But I don't always see that in the moment.
That is so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bryce, what about you? At this point in your life, what is it about this group?
Yeah. I didn't get saved until I was 19. About 6 months after becoming a follower of Jesus, I got introduced to this book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which is a really popular book now, and it's great. In that book, I was introduced to the idea of spiritual formation and introduced specifically to the idea of being an apprentice of Jesus, not just like a Christian, quote unquote. And so when you become a follower of Jesus, I grew up in the church. I never heard this idea. When you become a follower of Jesus, you become Jesus's apprentice to become a certain kind of person. And that kind of person is actually more in line with his intention of creation in Genesis 1. It's more in line with that than anything that you were ever living before. And so that idea of calling people back into the Eden blessing, calling people back into good and right and beautiful fellowship with God as image bearers, like that excites me on a different level. Jimmy and I have had hours upon hours of conversations.
I have no doubts.
About just like, the whole idea is bringing Eden back to earth. Like that's Jesus's mission, is like we're bringing Eden and earth back together. And so to be able to kind of cast that vision to people who are at such a formative age when I didn't get that vision is so exciting to me, because I'm looking at them and I'm like, it's so much better than you think. Like following Jesus is so much better than you think. It's harder than you think, but it's so much better than you were ever told. So that in and of itself just really, really excites me. And the fact that they're at such a formative age is even better. So, yeah.
Because the cool thing too is they have lives to lead. And so you're pouring into them, but then they go back home and you send them back out. And it's like you're sending these kids out who now have experienced and now will extend that love, right? And so that ripple effect starts really at just this level when those kids are impacted by God's love, and then hopefully will pour that love out to others, and then just continues, right? So it's like such an exponential multiplication, I guess.
It's so cool. Like when you look at Genesis 1, what's the first kind of command, that first blessing / command that God gives over humans? He said, be fruitful and multiply, right? Fast forward to Jesus when he's about to ascend after the resurrection and everything. He looks at the disciples and he says, now go and make disciples of all nations, i.e., go, be fruitful and multiply. He goes, we're doing creation all over again. And part of our vision for the Crew program specifically is we want to invite them into Jesus's inauguration of the new Eden, of the new creation. And we're like, we want this to be an epicenter where they come and they're formed more deeply into the image of Jesus so that they can go out and show the love that Jesus is giving them to others, so that they can be fruitful and multiply in the new creation,
How many Crew kids do we have on average during the summertime?
We had 112 kids that came through this summer total.
Yeah.
And many of them stay multiple weeks. So anywhere from 40 to 50, I think,
in a given week.
In a given week on the high school age level.
And people who are listening to this might be family campers, attendees, so they know it. But if you've never come to camp, camp doesn't run without Crew.
No,
it just doesn't. That's a behind the scenes, but also right there in front ministry that is happening in real time and serving the meals. I can speak for my kids who served Crew and had the best week of their lives out there working in the kitchen.
It's amazing to me. It is amazing to me that the service that they do, how hard they work.
Yes.
For a lot of them, they have to be in the kitchen at 7:30. They're not used to getting up early. This is their summer break, and that's what they're doing.
Right.
So it's a tough environment, but they
thrive.
They
and
do
you're right.
thrive.
It's the relationships. It's being able to live in close community with kids who you didn't know on Sunday, and now you're crying because you have to leave them on
Yes.
Saturday.
Yes.
And as Del always says, and I've said a million times already now on this podcast, that revival happens through relationships, right? And so
Yes.
this ministry is happening through relationships.
Yep.
And it's just really cool to see, like, 16-year-old kids encouraging each other to follow
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Okay, so that's Crew. Beyond Crew, the other kids, I say kids, but they're young adults, are road team members. And I know that we've talked about road team members on here, but what and that whole experience. We don't necessarily have to get into that because I think everybody knows that. What I want to talk about is what's the discipleship behind the road team experience, because there's a lot of intention and thought that goes into that.
Totally.
Yeah, so I traveled for 11 years as a team pastor with one of those team, and that was my job, was to, to kind of shepherd and mentor that group. And I remember at the end of my first year, just kind of stepping back and realizing how unintentional I had been. So many things I'm like, man, I wish I'd have said this or taught him that or whatever. So partly that's to say some of the discipleship, some of the growth is just innate because of what they're doing. You're in churches, you're interacting with people, you're teaching lessons, you're sitting under teaching. It's so much of what we do is focused on being others focused. How we dress, how we talk. The things we do, all of it is very much be mindful of what you're communicating to everybody. So there's so much that we do, and just even the technical training, honing their skill set, their instrument they play, or teaching children, or the technical, audio visual, all of those things is just it's a training ground for all of that. But then the other part of that is just we have a lead revivalist on each team, and then we have a team pastor and or family revivalist, depends on what their role is. But somebody that's on the team whose main focus is mentoring and discipling and shepherding those young men and women. So there's constant teaching. We have team meetings throughout the week. Usually we're going through some series together, or a book, or some type of pathway. And then just, again, working through life things, relationships, developing relationships, or like abstaining from.
Right.
And then, conflict management.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I can't think of some of the other things that you guys learned, just that, it's being, you're together. Somebody said this one time, I don't know the research, but I think it's probably accurate, that 1 year in Life Action on the road is equivalent to 7 years of relational experience outside of that. And I think about, when I was in college, I'd see my friends between classes, or every now and then we go to the ball game or coffee or something. But you get up in the morning, you get dressed and ready, and you show up, and you're with those people till 9 o'clock
You're
at night.
brushing your teeth in the same sink
Yes.
right next to them.
Yes.
You're going
It is life together.
And then, literally life together.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Bunking in the same room.
Yes.
And
hours and hours on a truck or a bus.
Yep. Yeah. It's an introvert's nightmare. It really is. Like, it is an introvert's nightmare, but I'm an extrovert, so I'm cool.
Right. You're fine with it.
I mean, the community aspect, as you were talking about that. I mean, so I traveled for 4 years. This is going to be my 5th year. The thing that kept bringing me back was the people, over and over and over again. I'm sure you've heard that on this podcast so many times, just about Life Action in general. But the more I look at it, especially having a 2-year gap between my 4th year a couple of years ago and now going into this one, I've had some time to reflect on, like, what do the road teams look like practically? And the more I look at it, the more that it reminds me of the early chapters of Acts, where they dedicated themselves to the teaching of the apostles, and they broke bread together, and they had meals together all the time, and they were constantly together, right? And in the kind of the post-Enlightenment individualistic world that we live in, that's kind of like this ideal that nobody ever really gets to. But with the road teams, like, there's a context there for leaning into that really, really hard. And it's a really, really beautiful, like like I mentioned, I traveled for 4 years. There's so many people that I could call right now that I haven't spoken to in years that we could just tell stories for hours about the road, And like, you're not always going to keep up those relationships all the time. Actually, many of them have kind of fallen to the wayside, but you have a shared experience with them over those years that nobody will ever be able to take away. And so there's a connection there. There's a bond there. So the community piece of the road teams is huge in terms of discipleship, because I think that's probably, when you look at the New Testament, the primary method by which we're formed into the image of Jesus is through community and then abiding in Jesus by the Spirit. So,
And I think about the discipleship that they're experiencing, they then mirror into the homes that they're in.
yes. Yeah. Yep.
And so it's not just there's so many different relationships that are happening out there.
Yep.
And you have the experience of the church, right? This transformational experience of the church.
Yeah.
But then within that, you have this smaller ecosystem of transformation of these kids over the course of a year, just because of that shared experience, because of things that they're learning.
Yeah.
And then that out of that is flowing into host homes where they're sitting down across from a table, from a mom and dad, and pouring into them after a really long day of work.
Yes.
Right. And so what a taxing job, but what an incredible, experience for them, enriching experience.
It is lovely. It's great. It is one of the hardest parts about being a team member, because you just worked a 10-hour, probably, on the short end some days, a 10-hour work day. You're beat mentally, emotionally, physically, and you come home and you're staying with the sweetest older couple that you've ever met, like super gracious and super kind and just lovely people. But they're a bit older and they just haven't talked to anybody all day. And so they want to sit and hear about your life, and they want to hear about your story, and like, oh, what does your relational life look like? Well, what do you want to do when you're done with Life Action? What did you do before Life Action? And they want to have these conversations, and you're just like, I really need to go to bed, and but in those moments, and Jimmy, you've told me about a time that you experienced these moments where like the Spirit is just like, lean in, like, stay there. This is actually where I want you to be. Like, do you need rest? Absolutely. And I want you to go get that rest. But more than you need rest in this moment, you need to sit in front of these people and love them extremely well, And they get to see that, like, whenever we're in a church, specifically the people who are like in the band or me as a youth revivalist, we're on the platform a lot. And so there is a side of us that most of the congregation sees, but then whenever you get into the host home, that goes from kind of a platform to real life. And that's where we're able to show people, like, we want to be about genuine apprenticeship to Jesus, not just preaching to you from a platform that you should do these things that we don't actually live, you know? And so while it is hard, we just had a meeting about this as teams the other day. It is probably the one of, if not the biggest area of ministry that we actually do on the road is in the host homes.
My experience was that the host families tended to get the most out of the events that we were in.
Yeah.
And often sometimes it was the older couple, but often it was the couple that had, or the family that had younger children.
Yeah.
And you go home exhausted and you're sitting on the floor playing trucks with some, but year after year, I've heard team members and even my own kids talk about relationships that they made with young people who grow up and come to camp and then grow up and come to crew.
Yes.
And they were like, yeah, I stayed with that guy. And so those things are really big. But also from a team pastor perspective, it's such a great opportunity for us to teach and shepherd, because we'll hear a story about a team member who went home and just didn't say anything and went right to bed.
Right.
And so that gives us an opportunity to sit down and say, hey, let's talk about what life and ministry looks like. And actually even like, this is training you for life. When you leave here and you get married and have a family and you work all day, guess what? When you come home, you get to help with homework and you get to play catch in the backyard and do dishes. And so these are life experiences that we then can sit down and say, hey, let me help you grow through this.
I love that serving with Life Action in that capacity is training for life.
Yeah.
So let's talk more about that, because these kids, they might come for a year or 2 or 4, but then they're launched out. And so how do you see this as training for life? And you kind of already touched on that, but I'm sure there's just so many examples of that. And not only just in life, but many of them probably go on to serve in ministry in some capacity.
Yeah, I had a conversation with his son Cameron. We were just talking about how so many people that him and I traveled with are like in ministry now and like doing really, really well, and like all over the country. It's really, really cool. Life is all about relationships, right? Like that is life in some form or fashion. It's just the relational dynamics that you have in your day to day. And so when you come on the road, because as we mentioned earlier, you're doing life together constantly, you're running into more relational situations than you ever would normally. Because so as someone who traveled and then stopped traveling, one of the hardest things for me was cultivating community after I'd come off the road. Because when you're on the road, it's just kind of handed to you on a silver platter.
Your friends are right there on the
Your
bus.
friends are right there on the bus all day, every day. So you're kind of set on community. It's just figuring out those dynamics. When you come off the road, you have to be super intentional about leaning into the awkward moments and going to the event that you don't know anybody at, and it's going to be really awkward, but you have to be super intentional about leaning into that. And part of that whole dynamic is that you don't have enough time to run into different relational situations as much as you do on the road. So like 2 hours weekly with my small group doesn't equal 10 hours daily on a road team. And so because of that, you're going to get annoyed with people really quickly, or you're going to fall in love with someone really quickly. So you're like, those things are going to happen. And it's all really good and beautiful and like super, and it's really natural. Like you need to walk through all of those things. But all of those things are going to come up way more often on the road, just strictly because of how much time you're spending with people. And so it's a school of relationships, I think is a good way to put it.
Yeah, I think another thing, I talked with a young lady that traveled with us for a couple of years. She was our audio tech.
Yeah.
And so much of what we do, when you're traveling and you're moving equipment all the time, you're constantly running into things where all of a sudden this thing isn't working, or this cut out, or that's, and just, and Sunday mornings, you got to be in early and just, you always show up, there's a problem, and, somebody comes in and hands you their slides last minute, there's a change. And so there's all these kinds of things. Well, I was talking with this young lady a couple months ago. She's now like, I don't know her title, but she's like a technical director at a church. Mm-hmm. And she said, Life Action trained me so well for the very things that I run into.
Right.
And she, told a story about how she came in on a Sunday morning and there was these problems and this kind of thing. And she was like, I've done this before,
Yeah.
And so just even that kind of thing, or, learning how to lead worship.
Yeah.
And then some of these young people go into, leading worship at a church, but they've had the experience of not just the technical aspect of playing an instrument or singing a song, but what does it take to actually, look people in the eye in the audience and bring them in and help, and then even, we emphasize a lot on authenticity. Okay. Never want to be fake, and so, that learning how to make sure I'm in the place I need to be with my relationship with Jesus and others before I step out and try to lead it. Those kinds of things are all little experiences that they learn and then take it with them.
Spiritual formation, human formation.
Yes.
Such a rich training ground, right? And we're a ministry, right? Ministry relies on the support from others to support us financially. And often I find myself in a spot where, if you work in the marketplace, it's easy to show what your numbers are and your ROI and, hey, here's why you should invest. I feel like it's harder for us sometimes because it's not necessarily a numbers game. It's more of a depth game and this preparation that is focused on formation that will launch these team members out into their lives, hopefully following Jesus in an authentic way and extending that love to others. And how do you quantify that? I don't know. I mean, we could say how many people, eventually go into ministry,
Right.
but it's just such a deeper, a personal investment of this program.
The ministry is a byproduct
Yeah.
of what the actual goal is, which is for people to be formed into the image of Jesus.
Mhm.
You know?
Exactly.
And you're right. It's so hard to quantify.
I think when you were talking, Stacey, I thought about Jesus and the 12 and how he spent 3 years or whatever that time frame was,
Yeah.
teaching, pouring into them, correcting, guiding, all of the things. And this is Jesus. He's the ultimate rabbi, right?
Yeah.
And for most of that time, they just were clueless.
Mm.
And then when Jesus leaves, he commissions them. The Spirit comes, and all of a sudden, all these things, you read in the Gospels, and they're like, and then they understood, and then they remembered,
Right.
when Jesus said this, and so it's hard. Like, I think if you followed Jesus around for those 3 years and looked at the 12, you would go, you're not really good at this, But then, and you can't define that.
Yeah.
But
Right.
then, a few years later, you look back and go, wait, they're turning the world upside down.
Yeah.
Right.
And where did that come from? And
Right.
when did that click? And what was it's how do you define that?
Yeah.
It's hard to define.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's the struggle in ministry, is sometimes
Yes.
you look and just go, that I kind of say this half jokingly, but there's a lot of truth to this. I can't tell you how many times I have quit this ministry just in my heart and spirit, or talking to God and just said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm not doing that. I quit probably 3 times this summer,
Really?
because you're pouring in, you're doing all of this
Mhm.
and not seeing the ROI
Mm.
and not seeing the response, and not, or you just get that one kid that's just pushing back and fighting everything you do.
Right.
And I just am like, I'm done with this. But you have to step back and say, what is it that I'm really doing?
Yeah.
I'm called, I love this. The main emphasis of Jesus' call was follow me.
Yeah.
It wasn't, hey, get saved. It wasn't pray this prayer. It was come follow me. And then Paul echoes that and he says, follow me as I follow Christ.
Yeah.
And as disciplers, that's our call, is to follow Christ, invite other people into that. We talked about this summer about, discipleship or leadership is invitation and example. Invite them in, show them the way, and then you just hope that they're going to follow.
Right.
Yeah.
And some do and some don't.
Yeah.
And that's,
And some do
Yeah.
and some don't, and some don't until later.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you've been around
very
long
true.
enough
Yes.
to know that happens too.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I've had team members call me years down the road and say, hey, and apologize, ask forgiveness for, things that they've said or did or how they responded in certain ways, and just to see, and now I'm here doing this and
Yeah.
and moving on in life, and that kind of keeps you going.
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you'll be heading out as the youth revivalist
Mhm.
for the Blue Team.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, that's a really important role, because the youth revivalist is the one who the youth of the church, they're entrusting their youth to come to us.
Yeah.
And so there's also discipleship that's happening throughout the week
Yes.
Totally.
within these churches. And
Yes.
that's kind of like the front line of it. That's what everybody sees.
Yeah. When I was on the road, it was, I was a children's minister for my first year. And then those last 3 years, I was in the band. And I would help out with the youth, but it was never my primary position. And I think working crew this past summer, being over the crew program with Jimmy, was super, like, so the whole youth revivalist position was not even on my radar. It all came together very quickly. But it's just so cool to see, like, Jesus kind of preparing me and stepping into the role in the crew program, preparing me for, like, he knew I had this coming. So stepping into that is familiar, but very, very different, because, like, even with the crew program, it's a lot of hands-on, practical. They're working all day, and we're trying to teach them how to follow Jesus in the midst of that. With the youth revivalists, I get them for anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour every night, and the main thrust is I'm teaching them biblical theology, or I'm teaching them about honesty, or whatever topic we're talking about that night. How do I take some of the ideas I have and formulate it into a 15-year-old version of that? And how do I keep them coming back? How do I make sure that they know they have a seat at the table,
Oh, so we've talked about crew. We've talked
Yeah.
about kind of the next step, which is college age kids who are taking a gap year or
Mm-hmm.
graduating first and coming and serving on the road. And then after that, at some point you all were thinking, okay, but after that, how can we create a bridge if some of these young adults want to step into ministry further? Where's that bridge? Either they go
Yeah.
home or we send them back into their context, but how do we help them along with that? Was that kind of the thinking behind this
Yes,
apprenticeship?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think where it first popped up was we recognized how many um, team members, especially, but even some crew kids that haven't traveled, but how many of them come, travel, serve, love the ministry, love what we're doing, but feel like their time on the road is done.
Yeah.
Um, but they're not sure. Some kids are like, I'm going to go be a doctor and I know what I want to do, or I'm going to be a
Right.
pastor. I'm going to school to get my, education. So that's great. Some of them are like, I just don't know. I guess I'll go home and I'll get a job and I'll kind of flop around for a while.
Yeah.
And we're sitting here at our home base going, man, we have so many needs and opportunities here, so many different positions. And we're looking at some of these kids that have, they have a heart for Jesus, they love our ministry, and they want to serve somewhere. Some of them just don't know where that is. So we kind of came up with this idea of this, we call it a residency program
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of like an off-ramp from road life or crew life into a position here. Position's a strong word because it's really very flexible.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, come and we're going to plug you in and see where
Right.
you fit. And there's some of them we're like, okay, that's not working for you. Let's try this. But help them, get to know themselves, see ministry opportunities, and I mean, ideally, we'd love to see that be an on ramp
Mhm.
to serving with us here in some capacity.
Mm.
But even if it's not, be a helpful tool for them to say, hey, I know what I'm good at now. I know what I love to do. And I'm going to go home to my church and I'm going to serve there in this capacity.
Yeah.
Or I'm
Yeah.
going to go into my community and be involved in this. Then it would just be a kind of a segue for those who are still in just that space of, I'm just not so sure, but I know I want to follow Jesus and I want to be in this. We saw we were losing some of these kids to just the empty space of
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And we're like, but wait, we've got opportunities here.
Sure.
How can we bring these two things together? So it's something we want to see develop into a real program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do really have like a vision, at least certainly
Yes.
for
100%.
developing this into something where it'd be an actual real training ground, not just in terms of ministry technical experience,
Yeah.
which is obviously a very big part of it, but
Sure.
also again the formation
Yeah.
piece of it. One thing, just really diving into who we are
Mhm.
as people. Talking about the SDI, the strengths,
Yes.
and motivational value system and those kinds of things. Learning about ourselves, helping them learn about themselves, who they are, how they function, what drives them, and where that fits, and then just working through, creating some healthy habits of being in the Word and reading and finding the community, like Bryce was saying. You have to come here and be intentional.
Yeah.
How can we help them
Yeah.
through all of that? So
Well, I'm just struck by the fact that like we started this conversation with talking about like the purpose of being an apprentice to Jesus, right? And then what we've talked about this whole time is you following Jesus and showing others and following you. This whole thing that you all are doing is such an apprenticeship on so many different levels. I think about the juxtaposition between this type of experiential learning and kind of a more formal education. And you think about like what sticks, right? Like if I were to tell you to, go hit a baseball, I wouldn't give you a book about it.
Right.
I would go out in the yard with
Yes,
you, and
yes.
we'd practice on swings, and I'd throw you a couple balls, and you'd
Yes.
learn to swing. And that's what you all are doing, right?
Yeah.
You guys are in the yard with these kids,
Mm.
pitching them softballs and kind of correcting swings and changing techniques and
Yes.
learning by doing. And there's just such a richness and like a depth to that
Yeah.
sticks. That I think is missing and needed in today's world.
Mhm.
I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
There's this teacher, pastor, psychologist named John Ortberg, who Jimmy and I both really, really respect. He was talking about the whole idea of like how we learn things. And he, like I said, he's a PhD in clinical psychology, so he really knows how we learn things from a psychological perspective. And he just said this line that struck me. We tend to learn much better through discovery than through explicit instruction. And so the going out and hitting a baseball rather than reading about it, that's what we're trying to do, is to give young people a context for them to learn through discovery. Jesus's primary invitation, like Jimmy pointed out earlier, was to follow me. That's something you go do. And then along the path, Jesus is helping you discover certain things about yourself and about him that lead you to wholeness and lead you back to being everything that he's always intended for you to be. And so giving people a space to be able to discover is such a gift. It's been so, so good.
Amen.
That's great. That's great. This question is for Jimmy. You've been at this for a while, and one of the guys that you've discipled along the way is now sitting next to you and is your partner in this discipleship. So what's that been like for you?
May make me tear up here. It's been such a fun ride.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember your first year or so, and just what a mess you were.
Yeah.
And
let me lean in real quick. My first day here at Life Action,
yes,
we had a team get. Him and Lori were our team pastors at the time, and so we had a team gathering that first night at their house. I'm sitting on their front porch weeping to my mom on the phone. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And my mom, she's like 10 hours away. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. She's like, do you want me to come pick you up? And I was like, no. And so I went back inside, and it was just, but like that first night, I was a mess.
I do think we all, at some point when we enter this ministry, we all have that, what did I get myself into moment.
Yes,
yes. It's so much, I like look at it and go, I haven't done anything.
Mm-hmm.
I've just been here and just been the guy that when, Bryce was, had a question about life stuff, was just like, well, let's just talk about that. And, hey, I don't know, talk to Jesus, and,
Right.
and I think it's just, I think the joy of doing this for so many years is just the privilege that it is to walk next to people.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. And God showed me this several years ago. I can't change anybody. I can't change my own children. I can't change my wife. I can't change, the young people that I interact with. I can't change anybody. It's got to be the Spirit of God working in them. And my calling and my joy is just to be there, just to be available, to make sure I'm in a relationship with Jesus and in his word. A friend of mine told me this years ago, a mentor said, people would rather drink from a flowing stream than from a stagnant pond.
Yeah.
And so for me, and Jesus says, if you come follow me, and you'll have rivers of living water will flow from your very being, the core of who you are. Yeah. And so to me, it's like, I just want to make sure I am being with Jesus. I'm in his word and have his knowledge and understanding of his word, so that as I walk alongside people, I'm just able to, help kind of guide. But it's amazing. It blows my mind to see this and be a part of this. It is my greatest joy, I think, and it's also a challenge. And
with me specifically.
Yeah. Well, and I love your answer to that. I do want to recognize that showing up faithfully every day for 30 plus years to be there for kids, that's nothing short of monumental.
No.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
showing up is 90% of it.
Right.
And Jimmy does that every day.
Well, I'll tell you the part that he won't tell you,
Mm-hmm.
which is that, and I say this because Jimmy and Lori are basically my mom and dad. They both have shown me what Jesus' love looks like on a different level. I never encountered what it looked like to actually be loved by Jesus until I encountered Jimmy and Lori. For them to meet me in the spaces where I was messy and broken, and I love what a counselor of mine said, she calls it the icky parts of your soul. To meet me in the icky parts of my soul and to look at me and say, you are so loved more deeply than you could ever imagine. I didn't have categories for that until I met them. And he won't tell you that, but that's the truth. And so, yes, while it is the Spirit who is the one who is animating all of this and bringing everything to life and making things beautiful again, it is through Jimmy and it is through Lori and it is through anybody else in that context that he is doing that. And it is one of the most beautiful, one of the most life-giving, and one of the richest experiences that you could ever be a part of. And God has been so gracious to gift me with that.
I feel you have to say "and Lori" whenever you say Jimmy.
Yeah.
Jimmy is not Jimmy without "and Lori."
Right.
And one of the only reasons I've been able to do this for 37 years is because Lori, so many times I come home and I need a place to cry and be, and she just like, you go sit on the couch and I'll bring you a Pepsi and, some snacks and, or she says, suck it up. I mean, there's so many times that she's like, hey, that's, tough. Get out there. You can't quit now,
Right,
And so, and then just, she brings such a practical aspect to all of this. So many times when Bryce would show up,
oh my gosh,
and just be like pouring out to me, and Lori shows up and feeds him, something, and
yes,
it's just the how open she is with our home and welcoming people, and she has taught me so much about what it looks like to take a young lady alongside. Where there's so many times she would just do routine, mundane things. I'm going grocery shopping, and she'd grab one of the team girls and say, "You're coming with me."
Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
And it would just, but it would, it would bring them into her life. That was such an incredible way of practically just bringing people. It's taught me so much about how to disciple in that regard. So, there's no Jimmy without Lori.
We all know that.
Yeah. Okay, great. Good. I just had to make sure I had to say
her
it,
discipleship is tireless.
Is.
That's how I would explain it.
Yeah.
And it's authentic.
Yeah.
And it's real. And behind all of that she's going to tell you how it is the biggest hug and love that it's all of that wrapped into one. And that, I think, is, again, so crucial for those kids, because you're right. I mean, she's walking alongside all of these kids out there too. And she's usually the one, if there has to be a hard conversation,
right,
she can do that because she's coming from a place of love.
Oh, she's had plenty of those with me. She'll just call me into her office and be like, "Hey, stop it." I'm like, "Well, okay, fine."
Yeah.
So
no, I echo that, and I'm really happy that you brought that up to honor her. And I will even say, just on a personal level, when I started with the ministry, I was really pretty new. And I remember being in that environment and being new to ministry and being new here and sitting down at a chapel. And she just came over to me and sat by me and she said, "I'm going to be your new best friend here."
That is the most Lori story. So I was going to say earlier, most of the time when I needed counsel, I wouldn't even really want to talk to Jimmy. It was more I just needed a brownie or something. No.
Well, thank you both so much for sitting with me and talking about this, and just explaining why you have such a passion for it and why it's so important. and just sharing your hearts and your time with so many young kids. I just appreciate both of you. And I know that I speak for thousands of people when they say the same. So
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
thanks for joining us for Changed Lives, a podcast from Life Action. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, would you consider joining us in this mission during our year-end campaign? Nearly 80% of Life Action's annual revenue comes from donations from ministry partners who help fuel revival in hearts, homes, and churches across the country.